Hey y'all, it's your girl Flo here, and I am here today to talk about mental health. I am someone who struggles with both depression and anxiety, and I deal with mental health issues from patients all day, every day as a social worker. And so, really, the crux and the purpose of Aroma and Flow was to be a conduit to the conversation about mental health. It was to present and to journey my kind of evolution of the process. And so, these five candles that you see behind me are the Arise collection, and it discusses how I arise out of a dark place that I was in. I had an awakening. I realized my reign. I started tapping into my intuition. I surrendered to situations that I couldn't control, and I learned to enjoy the ecstasy of life. Um, Not only do the candles really represent the process, but the scents inside of them do as well. They evoke emotions and alleviate stress and improve mood, all of these different components of the fragrances that are inside each candle. But not to really spend too much time on Aroma and Flow, but just to talk about me, Brittany Flow, as many of my friends call me, and the process that I went through, kind of realizing that I was struggling with my mental health. I think it's always been something that I've dealt with, regardless if I brought it to the forefront or not. I can remember as far back as middle school, probably being really depressed. Even in sixth grade, just being really just confused about life and myself and my self image. But I think around middle school, it really exacerbated when I started to have issues with my father and my mother as well. And I didn't really, I mean, my intellect and my intelligence really kind of covered up a lot of it because I was a smart kid. I did my homework. I did what I was supposed to do, but I was really struggling with emotionally. Um, when I was about 20, I think I realized how bad things had gotten. And it wasn't until 30 that I started to address everything. I mean, the things that we go through, the trauma and all of the things that we go through, it worsens until it is dealt with. It's kind of like um, a scar where you, or a cut that turns into an infection, that turns into sepsis, that could potentially kill you. You know what I'm saying? If it's not dealt with. And so, a lot of the way that I perceive mental health, and I used to kind of do some internship work at a state school, and I was like, oh, this is mental health. These people are crazy, you know. Not really understanding the levels to it. I mean, many of us only know 4 or 5 diagnoses. We know about depression, we know about bipolar. My favorite is bipolar schizophrenia. Just FYI, that does not exist. Um, we know about anxiety. We may know about OCD, but there are over 200 diagnoses in the DSM, in the Diagnostic Statistic Manual. It is the manual that we use to diagnose mental health issues. There are over 200 diagnoses. So most of us aren't aware of the majority of them that exist. We only know about the ones that get you a check, okay? And that's something that's perpetuated in our communities, in our society as well. Um, but when I turned 29 going into 30, I think is when things really started to get bad. Um, my family, my sister specifically, was just like, you're not okay. And I was like, I'm fine, girl. I'm in supervision. I'm trying to be a therapist. I don't need therapy. I can fix myself. What you talking about? And no, your girl was having panic attacks at work. I mean, I was just undergoing so much interpersonal issues inner battles with myself, that my sister, the person besides my mom and my brother who has known me the longest, who's probably the closest to me, is like, yeah, girlfriend, something's up. So making that call to my EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, was probably the hardest call that I had to make in a while, because I had to say, I am not okay. And just really figuring out what that even meant, and if it was something that could be fixed. I struggled. So I started therapy in March of 2019, and I went for about 6 months. I love my therapist. She actually helped me to reframe a lot of the things that I was doing, a lot of the patterns that I was in. She used an approach called cognitive behavioral therapy that really looks at your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, and the antecedents of those things that cause us to react and behave in a certain way, and how your thoughts and your negative thinking causes also perpetuates that as well. And so she used that approach with me, because as a social worker, and just the difference between a LPC and an LMFT and a LMSW or LCSW social worker, is that social workers tend to look at the environment. We look at the person in the environment. So if we all have things that are outside of our nuclear kind of orbit, like that affect us. So social issues, economic issues, things like what's going on with coronavirus, and how this thing is indirectly and directly affecting many of us. That is something that the social workers tend to look at. I selected an LPC, a licensed professional counselor, because by theory they look at the person. They don't really worry. I mean, those contextual factors matter, but not so much. You're focused on the person. And so because my socioeconomic situation was pretty stable, and it was, of course, things affect me, but I have a job, I have a home, I have things going. I chose to focus on Brittany the person. And um, so that was why I chose the LPC versus a social worker. And I wanted to see the difference in the scope of practice and how they practice versus how we practice. So making that call to a therapist at that time was just really challenging. I remember the day I did it, I was crying in my car, just overwhelmed, just not okay. And that was probably the third panic attack that I had over a span of 2 months. And so and then at the same time, I was starting Aroma and Flow. It wasn't what it is today, but I was in the process of learning how to make candles and creating candles. It's try to be something that's therapeutic, and that was actually the approach that I used to try to deal with some of the interpersonal issues I had going on, but it wasn't working. It was not working. So going to therapy was a commitment, both financially and emotionally, to be like, I'm gonna get the best out of this. And therapy does not work unless you work it. Period. Do not expect to go and have somebody tell you that you don't need to do anything. You have homework. You have things you have to do in order to get the best out of the process. So that was something that I did for about 6 months. I did it really up until I switched jobs and switched insurances. And so I haven't really pursued if she's under the insurance that I have. And I don't really want to find another therapist, but if it comes to where I have to do that, then I will. So as I talk about mental health awareness, I want you to know that you can look like you have your shit all together, okay? You can have a great job, a family, all of that stuff, and still be struggling emotionally. That is okay. Like, I use mental health, and the analogy that I give is about like us being cars. Like, when you get your car brand new off the lot, like, it's supposed to have no issues. Sometimes it does, okay? But typically you get a fresh new car, no issues, and you're good to go, right? No miles on it, Boom. Um, but the more and more you drive that car, the more and more maintenance it needs. The more stress you put on your car, the more time, the more all of those things cause your car to eventually break down. And what I consider mental health and going to therapy to be is that, okay, I need a tune up. I need an oil change. I need tires. I need new tires. I need I might want to do a little sprucing up on my car and get a new stereo put in, whatever. But it requires maintenance. It requires um, someone that may not be you. You may be able to handle some things, but some things you may have to take to a mechanic. And it doesn't mean that your car is going to stay in the shop forever. It means that it has to have some time to get things right. So think of it like that. We have so many thoughts that go on in our, like over 60,000 thoughts that we think every day. Probably 10% of which we say. And a lot of that is just mental wear and tear on our minds. And so we need that opportunity in a safe space to really deal with those issues and confront them head on and see what the root of them is. Because a lot of times what we find is that they're not our own. Those things are not what we thought. Those things are what we've been taught. And once you realize what you've been taught versus what you believe, it's a whole new ball game. It's a whole new concept of yourself and your self-awareness. And so that is the awakening. That is the process of thinking, okay, what do I believe about me? And what do I believe about the world and how I interact with the world? It's not easy. It's not easy. I think we deflect a lot of the attention off of ourselves because it's easy to think about other things and giving other people what they want besides finding our own journey, accepting it, appreciating it, loving ourselves for who we are. The phrase that kind of resonated to me this morning, because this morning I woke up thinking like I had a whole nother mental health issue, that I was a narcissist. And I was just going down this rabbit hole trying to figure out, well, why do I respond to things like this? And why does this happen like that? Like all of those different things. And I'm like, where is this even coming from, bro? Like, where do you get, why do you think you're a narcissist? So I have to do some unpacking of that today. But I was just like, the thing that resonated with me today was like, the goal is never perfection. We are not perfect. Nobody on this earth is perfect. Nobody has their shit together all the time. It's not meant to be that way. And if they do, they're lying. They are lying. You can be content with where you are, or you can want to improve. At the end of the day, this is a journey. Like, you learning you is a journey. You figuring out you is a journey. You are going to be your greatest love ever. Ever. No one will ever be able to top that. And you figure out how much you want to love yourself. You figure out how much you mean to you. It's a journey, y'all. Like, you ain't gonna get it right all the time. You ain't gonna feel like things are Gucci all the time. It's not meant to be that way. But the constant exploration of self is the greatest. It's the greatest gift that you could ever give yourself, is the knowing of who you are and how you interact with this world. So I say all that to say, I know that May is a great time to start. As we're kind of getting back into the swing of things, you're starting to see more of the non-essentials out on the road. May is a great time for you to reflect and determine if mental health is something that you want to make a priority in your life. That means if you are employed, contacting your EAP, your Employee Assistance Program. A lot of times you get free therapy for different reasons, and you can get it for different reasons. Like if you've had job loss, or if you had health issues, for whatever reason, you can go to see a therapist and get that for free. Sometimes insurances cover behavioral health and therapy. So you may have a low pay, low cost. Like mine used to be like $15 after my insurance. Um, and I would go every 2 to 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks, I started going every 2 weeks, and then I stretched it out a little bit more later on when I started getting the hang of things. Um, and then there's so many services that are available to you, telehealth, where you can just be on your phone and just talking to somebody. You can go to these community clinics that have them. You may just need a support group. You may not even just need therapy. You may just need to journal. You may need to, um, but it's good either way just to see. Everybody doesn't need therapy, but most of us do. So that's all I got. That's my story, my mental health journey. That's why Aroma and Flow, what it is what it is. And my encouragement, my hope is to inspire you all to think about your own mental health journey and how you can create a better life, a better quality of life for yourself by dealing with the things that go on in your mind that most people don't know about. So that's all I got. It's been real, y'all. I will be coming out with a blog called All Things Flow, because I have these moments where I just be wanting to go. I be wanting to go. And then I also have Aroma and Flow. I'm gonna do a sale today for Cinco de Mayo. I think I'm gonna do 55% off for 5 hours. So y'all gonna have to come on with it. Um, and then y'all just be great. Y'all continue to follow me. I'm going to be doing a lot of changes, a lot of new add-ons and additions, because y'all have been so supportive of me. I'm so grateful. Um, Thank you for giving me your money instead of Yankee Candle. And so thank y'all so much, and y'all have a great day. And please get a margarita for your self-care if that's what you need. But don't drink. Drink responsibly, okay? Drink responsibly.